Under the soft October light of Washington, D.C., the mood in the U.S. Capitol feels lighter today. For weeks, the corridors of power have echoed with concern over rising trade frictions with China. But this morning, a cautious calm has returned, and with it, a message of confidence from America's top financial voice. Outside the White House, reporters gather along the South Lawn. Cameras flash as U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent steps up to the microphones. His tone is deliberate, his message concise but unmistakable. He tells the waiting press, "I think that things have de-escalated. We hope that China will show the respect that we have shown them, and I am confident that President Trump, because of his relationship with President Xi, will be able to get things back on a good course." The words ripple through the press pool, calm, measured, and yet deeply strategic. In a single sentence, Bessent signals that the worst of the recent US-China trade turbulence may have passed. Just days earlier, Beijing's sudden decision to tighten control over rare earth exports sent shockwaves through markets. Rare earths are the quiet engine of the modern world, 17 metallic elements with unpronounceable names but indispensable uses. They power everything from smartphones and wind turbines to electric vehicles and precision-guided missiles. When China, the world's dominant supplier, hinted at new restrictions, alarm bells rang in Washington, Tokyo, and Brussels alike. In response, markets wobbled. Prices of key materials spiked. Commentators spoke of a new front in the economic rivalry between the United States and China. Yet within a week, the tone shifted. Behind closed doors, diplomats worked phones. White House envoys quietly reached out to their Chinese counterparts. And now, standing before the press, Scott Bessent's remark, "Things have de-escalated," lands like a sigh of relief across the global economy. For those who follow US-China relations, the shift feels familiar. It recalls the trade war drama of the late 2000s, when both nations imposed tit-for-tat tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods. Back then, markets rode a roller coaster of optimism and panic, but this time the playbook seems different. Both sides appear determined to avoid open escalation. Analysts say Bessent's statement reflects months of behind-the-scenes repair work. President Trump's personal line to President Xi, once symbolic, now practical, has reopened a dialogue that nearly froze earlier this year. In diplomatic terms, respect may be the key word. Washington is signaling that it's willing to stabilize relations, provided Beijing does the same. Inside financial circles, the reaction was swift. Within hours of Bessent's statement, the dollar steadied, stock markets regained lost ground, and rare earth futures eased from their highs. Commentators on financial networks framed it as calm after the storm. For investors, even a hint of predictability is reason to exhale. Yet beneath the surface, Washington's strategic anxiety remains. The rare earth dispute touches more than trade. It strikes at national security. The US Defense Department relies on these minerals for fighter jet engines, missile systems, and satellites. American factories from Nevada to Michigan depend on rare earth magnets for electric vehicle motors. Each shipment delay from China can ripple through entire industries. That vulnerability is why Bessent's phrasing, "get things back on a good course," carries weight far beyond economics. Policy experts suggest the Treasury's calm tone masks a broader effort to cool tensions before they reignite. They point to what insiders call the Phase Zero dialogue, a discrete back-channel revived by both governments to manage disputes outside the spotlight. Through it, officials exchange informal updates on supply chains, technology controls, and financial access. Issues too sensitive for official press releases, but too critical to ignore. In this sense, Bessent's comment isn't just reassurance to the public, it's a message to Beijing that Washington prefers negotiation over confrontation. The Treasury chief, known for his straight talk from years in finance, chose his words precisely. Every phrase, de-escalated, respect, relationship, sounds as though it had been tested and cleared through the White House's communications staff. Officials close to the administration described the remark as intentional diplomacy. One aide put it bluntly. Markets needed stability. We gave them a sentence that delivered it. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, Chinese state media offered a restrained response. Their coverage emphasized dialogue and mutual benefit, downplaying the earlier tension. Editorials in Beijing framed Bessent's remarks as proof that pragmatism prevails. It was a rare moment of linguistic symmetry, both capitals using the same language of calm. For Europe, the easing of tensions was equally welcome. The European Union's trade bloc, heavily reliant on global supply stability, saw an immediate lift in confidence. The announcement came just as finance ministers were preparing for the IMF and World Bank meetings, where global trade anxiety was expected to dominate. Now, at least for a moment, the narrative had changed. Still, analysts caution that the calm is fragile. The rare earth industry remains an area of fierce strategic competition. China's near monopoly position gives it leverage. America's need for diversification gives it urgency. Several US mining firms are now racing to reopen dormant mines in California and Texas, with the Biden-era incentives still in place. Bessent's Treasury has quietly backed those efforts with federal guarantees, a sign that even in détente, Washington is planning for long-term independence. For Bessent himself, the role is more than economic stewardship. His background as a hedge fund chief has given him an acute sense of market psychology. He understands that tone can move prices as much as policy. By projecting calm, he delivers stability, at least for a day. But the broader implications stretch well beyond commodities. If Washington and Beijing can de-escalate over something as sensitive as rare earth exports, it may set a precedent for other disputes, from technology transfers to semiconductor cooperation. Diplomatic observers in both capitals are watching closely to see whether this episode becomes a model or merely a pause. Inside the administration, aides insist the shift does not represent any concession. There is no new agreement, they say, only a return to dialogue. Yet, in Washington's language, dialogue itself is a concession to realism. The White House believes confrontation fatigue has set in. Both governments needing stability to refocus on domestic economic recovery. In markets, this shift toward dialogue already has measurable effects. On Wall Street, energy and technology stocks rebounded. In Shanghai and Shenzhen, industrial shares reversed their losses. The ripple reached commodity traders in London and Tokyo, who trimmed hedges against rare earth price spikes. Even currencies breathed easier. The yuan strengthened slightly against the dollar for the first time in weeks. Beyond markets, the diplomatic machinery is beginning to stir. US and Chinese envoys are quietly drafting a schedule for renewed trade talks later this year, possibly in Geneva or Singapore, neutral ground for symbolic reconciliation. Treasury officials suggest the next stage will focus on rules of transparency, a term meant to reassure global investors that both powers can behave predictably. The story, however, remains as much about perception as policy. For Washington, calming markets projects competence. For Beijing, it shows restraint without weakness. Both sides are aware that even a phrase like de-escalated can serve as an unofficial ceasefire in the language of diplomacy. Observers note that this is not the first time tone has defined the moment. In previous episodes, from tariff freezes to pandemic-era supply talks, words have preceded action. The challenge now is ensuring that verbal de-escalation translates into structural change. The rare earth sector will be the first test. China's new export rules are still in place, but officials in Beijing hint they may delay enforcement depending on ongoing talks. In response, the US has temporarily paused its plan for retaliatory tariffs on certain Chinese industrial goods. Neither side admits it publicly, but both are quietly stepping back from the brink. For the global audience watching this dance of superpowers, the details may seem technical, but the stakes are enormous. Rare earths underpin renewable energy transitions, electric mobility, and defense capabilities. They are the minerals of the future, and whoever controls them shapes the next industrial era. That's why a single comment outside the White House can move markets across 3 continents. It is also why Scott Bessent's careful phrasing today drew so much attention. He wasn't just talking to reporters, he was talking to the world. In the hours after his statement, commentary poured in from think tanks and financial desks. Some called it a diplomatic reset. Others described it as a pause, a moment of equilibrium before the next storm. One analyst wrote, "Bessent didn't solve the dispute, he recalibrated it." Indeed, the Treasury chief's brief appearance marked a turning point, not dramatic, but deliberate. In an age when headlines are dominated by confrontation, even a modest show of restraint can feel like a breakthrough. As evening falls over Washington, the Treasury building glows beneath the amber streetlights. Inside, aides review the day's coverage, satisfied that the message of stability has landed. The stock tickers show green. Commentators sign off their segments with words like calm, respect, and steady path. The rare earth question remains unresolved, but the tone has changed. And in diplomacy, tone is half the battle. From the marble halls of the Treasury to the hushed corridors of Beijing's ministries, one truth endures: no economy wins a trade war. Both nations know that mutual respect, however cautiously expressed, is cheaper than conflict. And so, on this October day, Washington breathes a little easier. Scott Bessent's brief sentence has become a signal that between two rival giants, quiet diplomacy still has a voice.